My name is Patty Bellato, president of the Pwc Connecticut Chapter and Associate and Manager of Marketing and Business Development for Van Zelm Engineers. Our Pwc Connecticut Awards program is underway, and the deadline has been extended to December 15th. There are 4 awards: Woman of Achievement, Rising Star, Excellence in Mentoring, and Volunteer of the Year. Please visit our website for more information and to nominate somebody. Our scholarship program will open beginning January 1 with applications due March 31. If you know a student from Connecticut or Western Mass and/or an out-of-state student attending a college in Connecticut or Western Mass who is pursuing an undergraduate or graduate degree in the AEC industry, please pass along the information. The board has not met yet to decide how many scholarships we will give out, but in the recent past, we've given out about $50,000 a year, consisting of 15 $3,000 scholarships and a $5,000 donation to ACE mentor program. Our sincerest thanks to our board, volunteers, members, guests, and sponsors who help make us a success. We know everyone wants to be together again, and we are working very hard to make that happen in 2022. On behalf of the board, we wish you a very healthy, safe, and happy holiday season. I would like to turn this over to Bob Lavanera of Wilson Construction, who will take a moment to recognize our sponsors.
Thanks, Patty. Good evening, everyone. I want to take a moment to recognize our levels of our sponsorships and of our program tonight that make PwC possible in tonight's program. So we'll start with our executive sponsorship level in alphabetical order. We have BVH sponsoring us tonight as executive sponsor, as a Silas O'Brien Company, Consulting Engineering Services, CES, Harry Grotsky and Company, La Rosa Group, Markham LLP, Turner Construction, Van Zelm Engineers, and Whiting Turner Contracting. Rounding out our annual sponsors are BL Companies, Cohn Resnick, de Blasi Associates, PC, Dietz and Company Architects, Flowtech, Gilbane Building Company, Hinckley Allen, J. Fierick Photography, O&G Industries, Robinson and Cole, STV, and Wilkinson and Wolf. And of course, our foundation sponsors: Construction Advocacy Professionals, EDI Landscaping, EDM, Garcia and Milas, PC, K Enterprise, McElroy, Deutz, Mulvaney and Carpenter, Robert Benson Photography, Shipman and Goodwin, and of course, Wilson Construction. And then finally, our program sponsors tonight. We're very thankful for them for sponsoring. So again, BVH, a Silas O'Brien Company out of Bloomfield, Harry Grotsky with offices in Middletown, Petra Construction out of North Haven, Slam Collaborative at Glastonbury, SMRT, expanding their footprint in Connecticut, and Towers Goldie, landscaping design from New Haven. Tonight's program, as we all know, is focused on private K through 12 schools, and developing the program was very simple. They took a list of all the schools that I was not able to get accepted into, and that became the list. I'm going to turn it over to Susan to begin the program. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. Before we introduce our speakers, I would very much like to acknowledge and thank our technical wizards, Kathy DeFrancis Vittorio of Fuss & O'Neill and Amy Ray, EDM Architects. Kathy and Amy work diligently behind the scenes to keep PwC's event delivery seamless and all of you connected. Okay, sorry about that. And as I'm talking about seamless technical difficulties, I was asked to turn my video on. We couldn't have kept PwC's programs alive during the pandemic without Kathy and Amy. So thanks to both of them. I also want to thank the members of the PwC Program Committee. We meet every week and they all work extremely hard on preparations for this and all PwC events. Those individuals are Lauren Askaloff of Shipman and Goodwin LLP, Patty Bellato, Van Zelm Engineers, Kathy DeFrancis Vittorio of Fuss & O'Neill, Amy Ray of EDM Architects, and Tanya Catolo of Slam Construction Services. To maximize the time allotted to us, we will focus as always on program content rather than on extended introductions. Please, if you have any questions that come to you during the presentation tonight, submit them through the chat function, and Kathy Vittorio will forward them on to Heather Taylor, the moderator. I'm very pleased now to introduce our panel for this evening. In alphabetical order, they are Brenda Bullied, Director of Facilities at Pomfret School, John Bryant, Director of Facilities at Hotchkiss School, Sheila Culbert, Head of School at Loomis Chaffee School, Alex Curtis, Head of School at Choate Rosemary Hall, Dr. Meera Viswanathan, Head of School at Ethel Walker School, and last but by no means least, our moderator Heather Taylor, AIA Lead AP, who is Campus Planner and Architect at Phillips Exeter Academy. I am now going to turn the program over to Heather's very capable hands.
Susan, thank you. And thank you all this evening for joining us. Each of our panel members this evening represents a private school that is among the top ranked institutions in New England. As all of us here this evening are aware, private schools are an important part of an American elementary and secondary education, providing instruction and cultures that are different from what our public school colleagues offer. COVID-19, the pandemic, showed how resilient our institutions are and how important it is to have the kind of leaders we have here with us today. At first, it appeared the pandemic may be especially a dire threat to private schools because, unlike public institutions, we do not receive dedicated taxpayer funding. We are all very thankful, though, for our donors who allow us to have the kind of funding and emergency funds that made it possible to do what we've all done in the last years. The pandemic has challenged private schools in many ways, particularly as it is related to our core missions, providing top-level education, but above all, keeping our community safe, both students and adults. The pandemic affected everything. At first with remote learning, and last year, was an experiment of how to get students back to campus safety, new protocols, processes, lots of communication to our communities and families. For the interest of our audience tonight, definitely the last couple of years have definitely impacted design and construction plans for most of us. In some cases, it sped projects up. In other cases, it may have deferred things. But if nothing else, we all demonstrated a huge degree of flexibility and are being nimble to respond to what was going on. While reporting is less standard for public schools, we can assume that some of the statistics are similar to those of higher education. Colleges have indicated completed construction was down nearly 10% in 2019 and 2020. That percentage is projected to grow to 14% in this current year. I don't know about that. I feel like it's, for all of us, I feel like it's going and growing. The percentage of institutions reporting fewer funds available for construction jumped between 2019 and 2020. And with nearly 80% of respondents indicating there will be no change for fewer funds in 2021. I will say that major renovations and modernizations appear to be the major focus of both projects in 2020 and 2021. I will say we have a mixture of both on our campus. And as an example, we actually sped up the construction of a new dorm and with hope that we would get ahead of the curve of the rising prices. I can say we got our GMP in that time, but by the time the buyout was happening, we've been working very hard to keep things on budget. And I can also say that our CM is getting and their team is getting a lot of gray hairs having to deal with delivery and the whole supply chain that we'll talk a little bit about for sure. We certainly have definitely had to adjust our 10-year capital plan in the last year. Some things stayed on the same schedule while others slid up and some maybe pushed back. but I can say that for all of us, I'm certain that we have COVID-related costs that were never in any of our plans. Among some of the COVID-related issues educational institutions have had to face: staff shortages, availability of nearly everything, uncertainty about physical requirements for campuses, and planning for post-COVID space, as well as for construction projects, issues of, as I had noted, supply chain, labor shortages, extended lead times, escalating construction costs, all of those fun things that just seem to be more intense than ever. Private institutions in New England are true leaders with regard to cutting edge strategies and initiatives in the built environment. Today, we are joined by an exceptional speaker panel, each of whom has been planning and investing in the future for much of their careers. They will share with us their experiences, lessons learned, and thoughts about the future of private school education in our region. One of the great silver linings of COVID and doing events like this virtually is that we've been able to bring together leaders that typically would not have the time to travel, attend an event, travel back. And so I want to just say how thankful we are this evening that we have 3 heads of schools and 2 directors of facilities, all of whom have very lengthy lists of other things to be doing. So with that, I just want to say thank you for having you all join us this evening. And with that, I'm going to move on to some of our questions that we have. Campus design and construction, present, past, present, and future. We know that each institution is unique, but if you would or could share with us how the pandemic has impacted construction during the 2019-2021 school years. Did the pandemic cause you to shift your focus or future plans of construction? And if so, how? Are there any other issues impacting your plans for design and construction? And if so, what? And with this, we're going to have each of our members of our panel speak a little bit about this. So I'll sort of egg you all on, but we'll start with Brenda.
Thank you for having me. The pandemic definitely shifted everything that we did at Pomfret School. Like most people, students were remote from March 2020 through the end of the year. We were in person in the fall, remote for the winter, in person for the spring, and then in person now. So immediately when the pandemic hit, I was actually deputized to be on the COVID czar. So my personal role split it as well. So at the same time, our CFO was diligently watching the markets and decided to refinance for some major capital projects that were unexpected. So I would say in March 2020, we shifted most of our outside projects that would have been done like summer capital projects to be in-house projects because we had a full staff that were no longer had, their regular duties. We went into planning mode for construction that summer. We had some deferred maintenance on our rink and some slate roofs that we knew that we were going to move ahead with. So by the time we hit this past February of 21, we started a renovation on our rink. We were in final design for a renovation of our auditorium on campus. We were getting ready to break ground on 3 new faculty houses and then deferred maintenance of one of our major buildings, slate roofs. So about a little over $10 million is what we were expecting, $10 to $12 million in construction costs because all the projects were staggered. So I think what I would say how things have changed, the rink was first. We started in February, ended in August. Went as we expected. Any construction project to have gone prior to that. Same thing with the roof. We kind of knew what we were getting. Materials were ordered. We were fine. The other 2 projects, our housing project and our auditorium project, are in the COVID cycle right now. We've just been trying to manage those 2 projects and accept how COVID has changed the supply chain, like you just mentioned, supply chain, timeframes, losing staff left and right from infections, and contractors all of a sudden not being able to be on site. So our focus has changed on those ongoing projects right now and trying to manage them and figure out which of the legs are quality, cost, or time frame are we going to be stabilizing at any particular moment on our stool. So that's kind of, that's how we've handled construction. It changed dramatically because we went into a capital spending moment that we were not anticipating.
John, how about you all at Hotchkiss?
Yeah, I would say when in March of 2020, when COVID hit, and I can remember sitting in the auditorium for a talk from our physician on campus, and that was the last time anyone was going to sit in those seats because we had a project actually planned for Walker Auditorium on campus for a year later, but because I guess I'm kind of thinking about all the things you said, Heather, and the timing that Brenda was talking about, when the students were there, when they came back, when we were teaching completely remotely, and when we were having a hybrid situation. But we couldn't use this auditorium as an example. We could not space people out at 6 feet apart and get any kind of density in there or enough folks. So during our January 2021 meeting, the board said, hey, we're not using that space. Let's see if we can get it done now. The drawings were not done and the funding was not in place, but we did start immediately. While we're doing the demolition, we continued to work on the drawings. I'm wondering if the drawings are going to be done before the project is done, but we're still working on that. But I would say that during from March of 2020 on, COVID was all consuming. So in-house staff, I mean, kids were out on break. They had left all their possessions in their rooms. We packed up every student. I'm sure many schools did this, put their belongings. We used one of our rinks. We had a grid on the floor for every student's belongings within the square. We went through the whole plexiglass thing. We spread out dining to be, instead of one location, many locations. The classrooms were all changed from seminar type spaces to individual desks and spaced out kids, and then also residential. So any kind of residential, and this is the important point I wanted to make, that we added residential rooms wherever we could. We commandeered common rooms, and there's one basement space, and we converted all of those into student rooms. And that also allowed us, there was kind of a silver lining. So now that we're hoping, now who knows with the Omicron variant, but we were hoping, we were seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we're out of the woods. So we had all these extra beds, and we were also planning on starting dorm renovation. We call it Memorial Hall or Memo Hall. Because we had so many of these swing beds available to us, we thought, well, this is a good time to take that building offline. And we, rather than convert those student rooms back when COVID ends, which I hope is shortly, we would keep those and get the Memorial Hall renovation done sooner. So there's two large projects. We had a third renovation of a dormitory where everybody was off campus. We moved 3 families out of apartments in that residence hall to another location, and then began renovation of that building early. We thought we had much more time and we would be really in good shape, but we found that we couldn't put as many people in the building at one time. So in order to spread people out, things went a little bit more slowly. So that, and there was one other dorm that, because we didn't have summer programs, we could take another dorm offline. We call that Wheeler Hall. It also has the health center in it. We relocated the folks in the health center and were able to renovate some of their mechanical systems. So I would say there was some silver lining to all the preparations that were made for COVID. And we made some, on the fly decisions, but it did really benefit a few of the projects. I think it gave them a little kick in the pants, maybe.
Interesting to hear, and now we're going to switch because we have 3 heads of schools to hear from your perspective, because you all deal not only with, oh my goodness, what's happening on campus, but the health, the parents, the families, the other things. So Sheila, I'm going to start with you, and, how did it impact, the same question, but,
Yes.
you guys bring a different perspective.
Well, I would say it's not too dissimilar in that I think that we delayed some projects and started others up. Definitely, we are feeling the pressure to decompress across campus. And so the project that we delayed was the theatre. And it was more than anything, it was just that right at the beginning of COVID, I think there was so much uncertainty about, well, what was going to happen and how was this going to play out? And did we really want to be in the middle of a construction project? And quite frankly, I think that none of us really understood quite what the financial implications were going to be of this. We didn't know what was going to happen with enrollment, for example. We didn't know what was going to happen with fundraising. And so it just seemed prudent to us to delay a project that we could delay, and that was the theatre. But at the same time, we are in the midst of renovating our dormitories in the main quad. So we have 5 dormitories that needed to have some pretty significant upgrades to them. And just as at Hotchkiss, the pandemic actually gave us an opportunity to start those projects earlier. And so with no students in the dormitories in that spring of, when was it? Is it the spring of 2020 that this all started? We had empty dormitories. We packed up all of the stuff, the kids' stuff, and we were able to actually start. We had 2 major renovations, and in both of the dormitories that we were renovating, we were also adding a significant number of beds. There's new wings put onto both of those dormitories. And because there was nobody on campus, we were actually able to move that project forward and to get it done. And it provided us with a significant increase in beds so that we could decompress the following year. And in fact, what happened, and it happened, I think, at all of our schools, is the independent school world is doing incredibly well. We all saw, I think, a hefty increase in applications and admissions. And so where we had deliberately under-enrolled for that first year after this whole thing broke, the following year we've seen a 26% increase in our applications. And so those beds became absolutely critical. And we are going ahead with continuing the renovation and expansion of still another dormitory on that quad. So that's been great. I would say that we started the theatre project. We are just about finished with that. That project we were able to get in before, I think, supply chain issues really hit us, and before labor costs started to go up. But what we are seeing now with the renovation of this 3rd dormitory in the quad, we actually 2 more, and Palmer and Wareham are both being renovated, is that we're beginning to see pretty hefty increases in supply costs and also in labor costs. And so fortunately, we also had a very good year with the endowment, and we have put money aside in a plant fund. We started a plant fund some years ago, and that has helped us to pay for these projects. But I think that the uncertainty is still remains. I think we definitely have supply chain issues, and we have labor cost issues. And I don't quite know if those labor cost issues are going to go away. So that's something that's giving us a little bit of pause. And then the final thing that we've done is we also went ahead with our decision to do a master plan for the whole campus. And I think that that has served us well. We'll be ready to move into a new campaign. We know the projects that we're going to be doing. And then finally, just as all of our schools, we had to pour money into just upgrading the physical plan. All of the, I mean, it's not very sexy, but all of the no touch flush toilets, no touch switches everywhere, improving air handling in all of our buildings. And so there was a significant amount of money that went into just physical upgrades, infrastructure upgrades, IT upgrades, but all of that has paid off. And I feel that we weathered the pandemic very well, or are weathering it well, and that we're well positioned as we come out of this.
Alex?
Thanks for inviting me. Delighted to be here. I'd probably go into 3 areas. I'll start just by how wrong one can be. We had a lightning strike on one of our probably the main building on campus in late July 2019. So fire was the fire was fairly well contained. Our emergency response was great, but it took a lot of water to contain it and put it out, which damaged the whole building actually, and resulted in everything, the building having to be gutted and redone. And we took the opportunity really to start again. Only the walls remain for it. But I did foolishly think in July of 2019 of like, wow, it's good. Got the crazy, every year has a crazy thing. That got the crazy thing out of the way. And now, on with the year. Oh, idiot. So we moved very quickly on design and removing everything from the building, and they froze it in sections to remove all the mold that had come from the water, and took it down to the studs. So that was in progress when everything sort of stopped in March. The part that impressed me actually was how quickly they got back on track again. I mean, whereas we were in the school, moved to be remote, and in many ways it was our schools kind of re-getting going, and the uncertainty of COVID meant that last year was very was extraordinarily abnormal. I was impressed by how quickly the construction team were able to reconstitute how they were going about things to create a safe environment. And we have pretty strict protocols for them to be allowed onto our campus, even though they were separated from our students, and keep the project going, and keep the supply going at times when I thought, we wanted pretty aggressive. We wanted to open it, reopen 2 years for this beginning of the school year, so the building would be closed essentially for 2 school years. And full credit to the team, both on campus, the architects and the construction, various groups, that they were able to do that. So that looked like, things happened fairly on schedule and were not particularly impacted. I think, we did many of the same things, so we'll repeat them in terms of dedensifying and the things for COVID, but just a couple of things that I think the interesting thing for me was, for head of school and other people, sort of Brenda said that our attention was taken away for a period of time. Like, we really were focused on this, just getting through, each day, whether it was COVID or other issues that came up through the year. And typically we'd fallen into a pretty good routine of, something in fundraising phase, something in design phase, something in construction phase, and kind of, keeping those things through. And the pause that we took, I think, both on design phase and we were fundraising for COVID, not really for buildings. In fact, it sort of felt slightly distasteful to be doing those things. I think that's the effect we're feeling now, is that there's a pause of a year, and that things are going again. And our team was very good, that I didn't want a kind of a complete stop to things. So we did try to find a project that we could move pretty quickly for, and we're doing 7 faculty houses, new houses, and a reconstruction of one on one site. And that's a fairly that's a complex project, but fairly easy to move quickly on, because as opposed to one large project, so we're able to do that. The other thing I'll just add was not having summer programs on campus during the summer of 2020 and the summer of 2021. And we did some things in 2020, and as I reflected afterwards, I didn't think we actually took advantage of an opportunity that I hope actually never comes around again and hasn't been in place of an empty campus for an extended period of time. And I thought we've done some things in 2020 for us. For those of you that may have been to Choate or not, we're not an enclosed campus. We're embedded in the town of Wallingford, and we have 2 roads that run through our campus. Our campus master plan called for most of our paths on 2 of our sections, if not 3, to be redirected to move students to better crossings and to redo our crossings for better visibility. And we'd never really been able to put that in place because it just was a complete tear up. And we moved that project forward to the summer of 2021. And most of the campus was fairly impassable for a couple of months. And to get that project done and realize actually it should have been done. Like the difference it's made to have paths go conveniently on our campus. Anyone that's been here knows that was absolutely not the case. And to make our crossing significantly better was a real benefit. So full credit to Mike. I wish I could take credit for the team on campus that moved that forward. So things like that, I think, were meaningful and learning from not doing enough in 2020 to do that and a better job in 21.
Great. No, I think that when I think of, when the students went away and I saw everyone sort of smile, and Meera, I'm going to pass it on to you in a moment, but with all the stuff that was left behind, I think most of us had students on spring break. And then it's like, what do you do? And then who goes in and what do they find? And, who packs it up? And oh my goodness. But it's interesting that you say that, it's sort of like when we had the sort of the shovel ready projects that, Obama had wanted, like, what's ready to go? Like, you don't have so many of those on the shelf. It would have been great while everyone was away. But Meera, how about you? What happened at Ethel Walker?
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, PwC, for inviting us to be part of this panel. It's been interesting to me because it's a chance to reflect on the last few years, which have been tumultuous. It's a kind of Dickensian moment for our school. It's the best of times and the worst of times. And I feel as though our attention in that spring of 2020 was really triage mode. And, do you remember toilet spumes that we were all worried about, and whether all toilets needed lids, disinfecting, sanitizing, everything. It was a kind of wild time where we didn't know. And I would love to say we're through that. But in fact, I've just heard today, a few minutes ago, that one of our peer schools has decided to go remote, starting now, and for the rest of winter. And so I think we're in a new phase. But the interesting thing to me about what happened at our school is that while we were in triage mode, we were also in planning mode. And so we had plans to institute a full master plan of the campus, which we ended up doing in the fall of 2020. We found a wonderful architect and consulting firm, and it felt as though we had been waiting for this moment. So it galvanized the school around this project, and it is transformative, and it has transformed our board and our trustees, former and present, and it has become a time where crisis has forced that opportunity that people so often talk about. And so our fundraising, thanks to Zoom and those other things, Alex alluded to the fact that it wasn't just the pandemic, that independent schools really dealt with a trifecta of crises, whether it was the Black At movement and the question about protests involving social justice, or whether it was the political schism that all of us are feeling, in which there's a divided country. This is the situation in which we find ourselves. And so I feel really proud of independent schools who have not only endured, but have led the way. And most of us didn't close. We just continued forth. And it proved to be a safe environment. I remember one of the first purchases we made. It sounds silly, but it was very helpful. We bought 40 large tents, and we used them regularly in that attempt to decongest our buildings. In fact, our faculty and students discovered how pleasant outdoor learning could be. And that helped get us through. But that now has influenced where we are with the master plan and thinking about outdoor spaces and the notion of courtyards and the notion of those destinations on campus where people can engage, we can enjoy what the Japanese would call the borrowed scenery. And so it's been an exciting time for us. We are presently, we've had a dormitory, a new dormitory designed 54-bed, and we are hoping, God willing, that it will open in the fall of 23. We have a second dormitory in the planning stages. We have 2 smaller projects, and the master plan, which is fairly exhaustive. I just hope I get to live long enough to witness all of it. But I would say this has been a really great example of how crisis galvanizes positive change. And we, like other schools, we are out of dormitory beds. And so the need for this new dormitory is critical. But the other thing that we're paying attention to is the way in which it's allowed us to rethink pedagogically what we do and how to have our internal and external spaces reflect the mission of the school more truly. And so that's been a really exciting moment for us. So you're catching us at full throttle as we embark on this.
I think it sounds, and I know we have a script and I will stick to it, but I have to say, but listening to what you say sort of pops all kinds of other questions in my mind. And I think we could just have a really interesting conversation with all of us because we have, there's so many of these things that sort of one leads to the next. But I'll try to stick to what we have said, which really was a shift to talking about budgets. And I think everybody alluded to it a little bit because they're a critical part of the planning process of scheduling and design. And this process has clearly been subjected to unforeseen challenges. And so the questions to you all are, have you made any changes in the type of analysis that's done to calculate either return on investment on the onset of the pandemic, or have capital projects budgets been impacted by the constant changing pandemic mandates? And so Brenda and John are going to tackle this, but John, I think if you, I might actually switch and go John first, because you talked about some of the projects that you said, well, we didn't have the money in place, but we went ahead anyway. I mean, some of it blind faith. And probably a good thing you saved money, because if you waited, now you'd be hitting with these labor increases.
That's right. And it's difficult to find labor too. I should mention that. And up here in the northwest corner of Connecticut, we're very sensitive to that. But I would say with all of the focus on COVID and all of the internal staff, just, every day there would just be something new and, thinking out of the box and making things happen and spreading, the different facets of the private school life out, dining, residential, and teaching. I think for the smaller projects that could be postponed, maybe roofing projects and paving projects, although we did install a road during this pandemic, but a small entry drive. But a lot of those projects that could be postponed were postponed, and I think a lot of that funding was reallocated to COVID measures. And I think early on, the trustees and the administration kind of worked on funding for this. We kind of borrowed from ourselves. And so while we were also reallocating some plant preservation capital project money, we will probably be paying ourselves back over the coming years, a few years. So it was a substantial amount of money. A lot of the work will not, benefit us in the future, but there are some things that will benefit us. We converted 2 indoor tennis courts to a dining hall, and you know, we added sound attenuation materials, and of course ventilation had to be increased and heating and all of that. So, and we redid the bathrooms, and so that we will have, that's another place to have events going forward. But for the most part, I would say that a lot of the investments in some of these COVID measures will really not benefit us after the pandemic has come to an end. So I would say that roofing, paving, small capital projects that could have been postponed. We have a large cooling tower project that we wanted to happen a year ago. It won't happen now until after this coming cooling season. But the money and the attention and just the brain power in the planning had to be focused on this issue that we were facing, and really couldn't. Some of the projects, the other projects, felt like distractions at the time. So that's kind of how we dealt with it.
Yeah. Brenda, for you all, did you all do any different type of, again, calculating and budgeting sort of analysis on, okay, what are we going to do now versus what are we going to push forward? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think I jumped at the chance. If any space was empty that I could get a small project done, I was able to put a team of people. We have some local contractors that were very, very nimble. So those smaller projects we embraced and just went in there and did. So from an operational standpoint, what we're dealing with now is that I'm not able to be as nimble and turn things around as quickly and in a efficient and cost-effective way. So I'm actually dealing with a little backlash, I think, from where I might have been a year ago in terms of, from an operational standpoint, the small capital projects. From the large capital projects, I think we thought we put budget and analysis in place where we were in design. So in summer of 2020, for our auditorium project, we got into, so we had schematic design done, had the project budgeted in January. Watching the market, had the project rebudgeted in June of 21, and bid the project at the end of August. And the bid still came in 21% higher than our June numbers. So even though we put what normally would have been maybe excessive processes in place, I mean, I just gave you a 7-month time frame there, 3 totally different independent budgeting exercises. I still couldn't have anticipated what that cost increase would have been, really what hit at the end of August, beginning of September. So I don't even know that, you know, through my career, what I would have considered as normal and or excessive in looking at analyzing a project that I can depend on it now. And that's what I hear from not only my peers, but especially the contractors that we're working with. We end up spinning our wheels on a regular basis, trying to figure out what we did wrong. And I would not guess a square foot cost now. And our CFO always, he's like, what's your guesstimate? I'm like, I can't anymore. It's not something I'm able to do. So I think we've put methods in place. I don't know that they're helping us through this portion of this crisis. So.
No, it's always hard at an early phase of a project when you have these huge contingency numbers and you're like, oh, it seems like a lot. And then of course, when you're trying to bring the budget back in, like, can you attack those? And I just don't think you can't hold enough, because I mean, we, in the spring with our dorm, as I said, we had a GMP. So, you know, we were protected, but the poor contractor wasn't. And that was, you know, again, we're a team working with them. And literally every week the price of it, because it's a dorm, but it is wood framed, and a good bit of it. And, you know, making that guesstimate as which week do you sort of put the numbers in, because they were kind of going up and then they did come back. So thankfully they got it on the way back down a little bit. But to your point, that's what people are seeing. So another sort of unsexy kind of conversation. I mean, we've talked about some of the small projects that we were able to jump on, but infrastructure and deferred maintenance. So it sounds like everybody did jump into some of those. And Alex, I really like your idea of, well, while nobody's here, let's dig up the campus and the pathways, because those do make a huge difference. So what a great thing to do when fewer people are there. But this kind of question of infrastructure and, did the last year give you time to focus on overdue infrastructure upgrades with the reduced occupancy? I think you guys have touched on it a little bit, but if you want to add to it a little bit more, and did your focus, if any, on infrastructure give rise to a renewed focus of different directions? And then this is example of like decarbonization. I mean, that's another thing, sort of with where we are and kind of the climate we're in right now, there's a push to go even further. So again, the couple that are going to answer this, Brenda, I'll go right back to you because you were.
Great. So absolutely, it's funny, we slowed down enough to really analyze infrastructure. And I keep saying we're working on an auditorium project. That's the sexy part of it. That's maybe half of the project. The other half is an electrical room that's the same age as the building. It's 125 years old, and anyone can probably imagine what that looks like. A heating system that doesn't work, no fire protection. So just bringing things both up to code and addressing and admitting that has to go hand in hand with our sexy projects. And I think that we had a lot of time with the trustees because of COVID. So it gave mostly myself some just really good discussion time to talk about deferred maintenance and how we wanted to look at it moving forward. And the deferred maintenance conversation, as you just said, has shifted to a sustainability conversation. So it's both. I see that our current list of projects, I wouldn't say we're trying to concentrate on that as much as it is part of every project. It's part of every discussion now. So there is more of a focus, and I think we feel better about talking about it. I don't know that if going through the beginning of this pandemic and everything that we had learned about, being in crisis allowed us a comfort level to say, oh, by the way, we're in a little crisis over here too. Could we talk about that? But it did open up those lines of conversation so that we can hit that deferred maintenance much easier now than we have been able to in the past.
That sounds good. John, what about you?
Well, I would say that we have been focusing on infrastructure. We try to convince people that infrastructure is sexy. So over the recent years, we've done a lot with electrical distribution, which was outdated. As we go through these norms one by one, we've continued to, and we've been benefited by the pause in summer programs. But we're converting these older buildings from steam to hot water with radiant heat. We're adding fire protection, fiber, all new electrical wiring and lighting. And so it's not, while we're there, we're also updating any kitchens and bathrooms and things like that. And of course, carpet paint and, whatever woodwork. But really, the main thrust of the projects is in the aging infrastructure. And when you have many old buildings, you often have these issues. So I think, this last year when COVID started, we had the last phase of our electrical distribution was really had to do more with emergency power generation. And luckily, all of that equipment was ordered well in advance, and it was here on time and was installed, and everything went well. And really, the shutdowns weren't as much of a problem because there was very few people around. But we've continued to push in that area. I was going to just say a little bit about the decarbonization. It's been interesting during the pandemic with, we did, I'm sure most of you also did a ventilation study early on. So we did that and found out where the issues were, where we had plenty of air moving and where we didn't, how we were going to address that. But we during this pandemic, when folks have been on campus, we have been moving a tremendous amount of air in and out of these buildings in a hurry. And we have been heating that air and cooling it. And so on the energy conservation side, we're just updating our greenhouse gas inventory, and you can see the spike in the year. We benefited from when folks were off campus and there weren't as many lights on, and we actually turned back some of the heat in some of the dorms, but it really didn't compensate for the amount of air changes that we have been using. So, and that also, I think it created some moisture problems. This past summer was very damp, so we were bringing in a lot of moist air into some of these buildings. So we got caught a few times, with some mold issues that we had to address. So I think once we hopefully get out of this pandemic, we're going to refocus our efforts on and, begin to really go after carbon issues and refocus on new initiatives. We feel we have all the low hanging fruit. We need to go to the medium hanging fruit now and maybe do some more solar and look at cogeneration and maybe geothermal and things like that. But right now we are not looking at doing that immediately. We are starting planning, but we are not engaging in those types of projects until we get through this.
I'd love to have continued conversations with each of you. And I know that one of the things that was really important, because everything touches on topics that we're all dealing with. And one of the things that was so beneficial, I know, and the heads of schools can certainly say this, I know that the kind of 8 schools group and the various different groups and peer schools that got together where you were speaking with your peers at different schools, I think was very helpful. I know from our leaders on our campus, and that I know the facilities directors were doing the same at different schools. And it was great to be able to hear what everyone else was doing. And if you found PPE, where did you find it? Or if you found air filters, my goodness, talk about stuff we bought that we have more of than we'll ever know what to do with. We got air filters a go-go.
But that was I did participate with the 8 schools, and just that kind of that think tank, and someone would have an idea, and what are you doing? We tried that, but this is the problem with that. And it was extremely helpful, and everybody was very forthcoming and helpful. It was just outstanding.
So I want to turn and I want to give Sheila some time, because I think you have a hard stop. And so we're going to switch to a new topic, and that's innovative learning delivery methods. And rather than read these questions, I'm going to sort of talk about, the fact that, there's distance learning, there's online learning, and then all of a sudden we were all forced into it in Zoom. I had been in part of a few things where I had heard of Zoom, but I feel like for those that are of a certain age, I feel like this is like George Jetson. Like Mr. Spacely is like right here. You can have these video chats that we didn't really have. I mean, we had occasionally before, and it was maybe consultants sitting at a conference table and they were wee little people. And, now you see individual faces. But in thinking about innovative learning and delivery methods, like what's come, how is that transposed, and you're thinking of the future and kind of what you did? And Sheila, I'll let you answer this and jump into also kind of the space optimization, because I know you've got
Sure.
a hard time. So
All right.
go.
Well, thank you, Heather. And I would also reiterate that the collaboration among schools was outstanding. I would echo what John was saying. I think our ability to be able to talk to one another as colleagues and to find out what was working on one campus and might not be working on ours, and to just get the problem solving, it made all the difference. And I hope that that's one of the things that will continue as we come out of this, because I do think it was very helpful. You sort of asked specifically about would we continue with this hybrid model, and I think that what boarding schools do really well is the face-to-face. But Meera is absolutely right that this crisis also created all of these opportunities for us. And I don't know that we will continue with any hybrid model, but we will certainly continue with using Zoom. It taught us whole new ways of communicating with our alumni body, with our parents, with each other, and allowing students to have access to faculty in different sorts of ways. And so I think we will be continually looking to upgrade our technology and continually looking for new ways to bring in these ideas that sort of came up. I think it changed the way we teach. It changed the way we use our spaces. Again, just to echo what Meera said, we also invested in tents, and people liked being outside. Because we were doing our theatre, we couldn't do anything inside with our drama kids. And so they spent the year just very imaginatively using different spaces around campus. And so I think that it's taught us all a new appreciation for flexibility and for creative problem solving. And I think that there's going to be an awful lot of what we did that is actually going to stay with us. We have so many more classes that now want to meet outside, that want to take advantage of the environment, that want to use asynchronous learning. So I don't think that it's not all bad. It's been difficult, it's been traumatic, but I think we've all learned so much, and to the benefit of our students, I think. So IT is going to continue to be a major money sink. It seems to me that no sooner do you put in one system that you have to turn around and upgrade it yet again, and that faculty want just completely different sorts of ways. But I do think it's all for the good. So I'll leave it there, but thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed, and I look forward to meeting many of you around. There's lots of projects still going on, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your time and thoughts and words. And I think that it is, Meera, I think you said it so well, and you said it in a number of things that I had to write down of, like, you know, these quotes and, you know, just the crisis galvanizing positive change. There are things, you know, making, you know, certainly lemonade out of lemons. There's so many things. I mean, the tent people, my goodness, they have had better years than they ever had. We too, I don't think we've purchased ours. I think we're still renting them, and that's painful. But so I'm going to move to another question really about space optimization, programming, and resiliency. And this is: spatial changes caused by COVID have prompted campuses to rethink all aspects of space needs, allocations, and utilizations. But there is both pressure in the need to right size and repurpose campuses. Are new projects incorporating a greater flexibility of space given uncertainties we are seeing in the near term? How has the trend of collaborative learning, flexible, innovative spaces been adapted to reflect health and wellness needs? Have you utilized and adapted existing, I think we've heard this, outdoor learning spaces and added new ones? I would say this is, so there's a great thing for those that don't know it, coming up in this current or next year in April is the 200th anniversary of the birth of Frederick Law Olmsted. And many of us have campuses that were designed either by Olmsted or had influences. And you think of the importance of campuses, parks, creativity, like all of this in this time. And the other thing is, Olmsted is also like somebody that lived in the time of the Civil War. So social justice and all of those issues were hugely important to him. And it's amazing to think 200 years later that all of those issues, as you mentioned, Meera, the trifectum of like all the things hitting us were things that were happening then. So I'd love to even go with this outside space thing for a while, because I feel like all of us need to rethink. So I don't know, Sheila talked a little bit about it, but Alex, I don't know whether you want to add, like, how are you thinking about other things? Have these new paths changed the way you use your campus?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the flexibility of the campus really mattered, and it was interesting, sort of seeing this question ahead of time and how you flipped it a little bit. That this is it's hard for us to say it's been suddenly a massive turn. I think that what we saw in COVID was things that we had been doing for a period of time being useful and worthwhile. And, we've been thinking about, for us, flexible spaces, for a long time, trying to think about different learning styles, different creating spaces that allows us to have collaborative learning, to have hands-on learning, to have groups together, but also, and from small to large, and it got down to furniture being able to be moved around. And it was remarkable in COVID how you could see that, the impact of that. And a large part of our campus, they did a lot of work, like most of our campuses, in the sort of the 50s and 60s, and we've got these cinder block buildings that you can't really do anything with. Whereas, the steel frame, the frame spaces where we could take a wall down and change it and connect it, for example, to an outside space, was kind of, exciting. We've been, and we had found that it's an interesting question, again, when you're thinking about climate change and sustainability. Clearly, renovating a building in the short run is better than taking a building down and using new material. But on the other hand, if you have a building that will be efficient and usable for a period of time, and with new materials coming in that can do that, and we've spent a lot of time trying to do that balance, to think about which things should we be renovating and keeping, reusing, and which things do we just have to bail on, frankly, and get something that is going to be worth the investment over a long period of time. So that and we saw the benefit of where we had removed some of those buildings and have buildings that have been built for flexibility over this time, is where this comes in. In terms of the external space, for us, you spend a lot of time worrying about, I actually, my background's in architectural history, so I teach a class on Choate architecture in the spring each year to some seniors. And one of the questions I ask them is about, why do we got 30 plus people working on our facilities crew, like making it look beautiful? Like, why does that actually impact what's happening in the classroom? And we talk about the impact of, the lived environment and why those spaces and the subconscious effect that may be having. And there's a reason why a group of kids are hanging out in that quad, and a path leads to it, and there's a tree next to it. Like these, and it's an interesting moment. I don't have to talk to this group about the ability to produce something that looks so very natural, and you brought it up with Olmsted, that seems to, you just wander in and there's a wall that's the right height to sit on, and particularly with a group of students, and so for my class, observing that when we actually went outside so much, of how well people had created the campus to create those spaces that now seem to have even more value. I'll just add, yes, we have to decide. We actually had that discussion today in our senior officer meeting of, we're very used to a lot of tents, and whether that was nice and necessary for COVID, and whether people are used to them saying like, oh, wouldn't mind, not realizing quite how much it costs to rent or buy a tent. Like, well, it's funny when you actually get into that level of a conversation of like, I know that was, we had a lot of outside things for our family weekend this year, and it was great to put our parents in a space in the center of campus. Well, maybe we'll keep some of those things going, but other times it's like, oh yeah, I kind of liked it, made it easier. Well, will our budget support that? So I think there's a lot of thought about what things we keep, which things were necessities, and which things we keep and which things we let go, partly because of a budget.
No, I think that's going to be moving forward. That's going to be a very interesting discussion. So, so I'm going to move. I will try to keep on track and keep not throw you off by changing or flipping conversations. But our next question is really on campus master plans and other long range planning, which I know our audience will be very interested in. And a pandemic is an unanticipated and hopefully a once in a lifetime event. but its ripple effects can resemble a tsunami for sure. The butterfly effect. Given the delays in our current and future campus planning and construction, have there been any impacts to your campus master plan and our long-range plans? I think some of you guys touched a little bit on that because you touched on long-range plans, but I don't know if you want to delve a little further into that. And Meera, I'll start with you. You're on mute. I'm going to go backwards. Meera, Alex. Brenda.
When I think about our present situation, there are three buckets that most of the topics seem to fall into, and they are technology, sustainability, and community. And I think about technology because one of the things we had to do, even as we set up all these tents around campus, was to make sure that every square inch of campus had connectivity. And so that people could do all of this and could sustain that level. And so it's been a positive thing because this is our reality now. And so I would say most campuses, used to be limited to buildings and certain walkways, and now we just have to have it across campus. So it's that realization. Similarly, it was the jumpstart to getting, since we all had to go remote that spring, all of us had to have our entire faculties be able to do online learning where people were teaching in person, asynchronously and synchronously at the same time to those three different audiences. So that was a huge lift, but it also pushed people forward. And I would say that to go back to the lemonade motif, that was one of the positive things. It's also made us realize that we can't afford to have buildings or areas on campus that simply lag behind. Everything has to move forward. So that was one thing. The second is sustainability. And I feel very proud of the team we're working with, who are extraordinarily thoughtful. And what we found too is that there was a time where our school tried to do some work with solar panels that were a good deal clunkier than they are now, maybe a dozen years ago, and had difficulty moving them through the town approval process. We're now finding our town is incredibly welcoming and interested in what we're doing. We also have the opportunity to be kind of beta testers of some new solar technology. And so that's converging with our master plan. And I have a board chair who's so committed to the idea of sustainability that we're doing a charrette next week with our planning group, with our architects and owners rep and construction firm consultants and so forth, where we're going to talk about a statement on sustainability. And so again, we're seeing convergence in that way, both in the sense of stewardship of the land and resources in terms of natural resources and energy, but also financial sustainability. And that's just critical. We all, as independent schools, we realize there's a problem with the business model and we need to solve that. And the third thing I want to talk about really is the idea of community. Because if there was something put at risk by the pandemic, it was the notion of community. And as I think Sheila pointed out earlier, that independent schools are built around relationships between and among students, between and among students and adults, and between and among adults. And while we all adjusted to having to do remote learning, distance learning, all of that, we realized that what we do, that our stake is really around building those relationships. That's fundamental. So the question with the master plan in this era we're in is how do we increase in a world in which privacy has become the new luxury, and yet at the same time, ironically, human relationships are falling apart because people don't know how to connect. How do we help to educate the population? And how does our master plan, and this is why the opportunity for students to connect in different ways, to create, to collaborate is critical to what we do going forward. So I would say that idea of connection, of creation and collaboration is what defines our master plan. And what's beautiful to me is that the very process of formulating this plan and initiating it invokes those very same tropes. And so this is why I'm full of optimism about what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, it was an interesting question was posed because I thought, I came to Choate in 2011. There had been a master plan done in 2005-06, and we immediately updated that. We took another look sort of with a new head of school, did that 2012, and then again in 2018. And I imagine we'll go again in 2024. So, and I think those master plans are, long visions way past my time at the school. And so a little bit of my answer to the question was no, because as big as a moment this is, the master plan really was those big strategic vision of where we think our school is going to go. And there are certainly things to learn. And I think that we've talked a lot about them today that actually underlined the importance of some of the principles that we had put in those master plans, particularly creating buildings that were more flexible, that could be adjusted. And interesting, having done a few years ago a math, computer science, robotics building, and sort of try to create spaces that were bleeding edge, I would say even more cutting edge. One of the principles was, look, we know what works or is going to push us now, but there's going to be a bunch more projects in the next 10, 15, 20 years. That thinking is going to change. And I want to make sure I'm not tying down myself or my successor or my successor's successor to that building. So all those walls can come down, everything can be restructured, the space. And so trying to ensure, that's where I sort of go back to that question of whether new or to be able to have buildings adapt and change, whether to societal changes, to educational changes, to the world, an immediate crisis like COVID. But I think I'm not sure we're going to see sort of dramatic changes because of COVID to those big ideas. The one thing I just want to pick up on what Meera said in terms of who we are and master planning, just another aspect of that. We had dabbled dabbled is too weak a word. We had done quite a lot of work in online classes. We thought about with a couple of groups. I think we really felt sort of in the 2012, 2016 gap that was really where, whether it was these massive courses or small ones or collaborating with other schools. And frankly, we found there was a lot of dead ends in that road. We put a lot of pilot programs out that didn't seem to kind of pan out in different ways. And sometimes it was too many schools involved, or one or two, or not enough interest, or not rich enough experience. And we've tried to work out why that was. And I think COVID sort of put the exclamation point on that, to Meera's point, that threat, which seemed to be the online schools are going to come along and it'll be a cheaper alternative and change everything. When we experimented with that, with all the resources and all the attempts and so many schools trying different things, and we sort of looked at each other in April and said, boy, we pivoted quickly. We've done a great job of this. Our school went in weeks into online, our faculty were incredible and really did, and our summer program that followed it, did that. I'm sure we could do it better, but did it pretty well. Got quite a long way there. And the classes themselves were pretty good. And in fact, there were some real advantages to that. There was a more democratic classroom. Actually, a Zoom classroom allows more people to speak. It allows you to bring in speakers from far away, like we've done tonight, things like that. But at its heart, people could not wait to get back. Obviously, there were worries in the fall of 20 of how we were going to do that safely. But particularly our students and their parents, the determination to come back on campus, and our students were basically willing to do whatever we asked of them to be back on campus. And what puts this group of schools together is not just that we're independent schools, but that we're all boarding schools, we're all residential. And that experience, when we didn't have it, fundamentally changed our schools. And listen, there's lots of different ways to do schools, and for some students, this is the best thing or not the right thing. But for our group of students and what our program, what we have to offer, it was so clear that the residential setting and being together and everything Meera said about community and just building on that was at the heart and was actually irreplaceable. And so the commitments we had made in our master plan to the buildings that we would need and what they would mean, I would say COVID actually redoubled our commitment to them rather than made us make dramatic changes. It was like, okay, this matters. we're gonna double down basically on it.
No, I wholeheartedly, you all are amazing. And so Brenda, I'll go to you on this.
So we completed a master plan in 2014, I think it was. But it was just centered on the academic buildings on campus. We didn't touch the residential aspect of our campus at all. And what COVID did is it's caused us to rethink that. And, you know, we may have strayed a little bit from our master plan because of, we had to focus on, I'm just going to reiterate what you just heard, is this focus on community, this focus on being together. You know, as I look into, we've just started internally planning what our vision of a science center is. And I think if we had done this 2 years ago, it wouldn't be the same building that we're designing now, because the words that I'm hearing when I meet with the faculty, it's about the gathering and how do we get the community in there. It's about, I think flexibility is just inherent in everything that we do moving forward. But when I look at long range planning, they're really, I would say groups are open to asking a very open-ended question about how we teach, why we teach, you know, what we're teaching. And it all leads back to that community aspect, even to the point of citing a building right now. As a facilities director, I might have been like, well, it's important that we cite the building on, you know, points A, B, and C are really good places for the following reasons. I think that that's taken backstage to, we need to cite the building in this location because it is the heart of our campus and it is where people will gather. So the focus has definitely changed. And I think as we get ready to embark upon a new master plan, that's what I'll see moving forward. So I can speak about it in the more shorter term, as I said, one building, but I see people's opinions and thoughts changing, and it's time to revisit our master plan to address that.
I think I can reiterate kind of what you all have said. And as the experience, even on our campus, we have our assembly hall. I know, Alex, you guys have just finished, you know, performance and assembly, a place that you can bring everyone together. To me, the most poignant photo we had during COVID was actually of our principal, we call our head, our principal, of standing in our assembly hall alone, with the place completely empty, but yet being projected out, you know, across the globe to everyone. And wasn't it amazing that we could at that moment bring everyone together virtually so that in some ways we were together? But there had been some conversation with some of our alums of like, well, you could save a lot of money if you actually just, you know, rather than expanding the assembly hall to accommodate everybody, couldn't you just go to like virtual and put some of them in another room and have them in different places and spread them out? And I would say we resoundingly, absolutely not. It is important to bring everyone together and have that energy, whether it's, you know, one dorm or another, they're, you know, cheering after each other. And so to reiterate what all of you have said about the importance of community and just that intensity of that youthful exuberance that we have on our campus and curiosity is really important. We have a few minutes left, and I'm going to go to sort of kind of a final words of wisdom. I mean, we could go on with this conversation for a long time, but and this is really a question that I know our audience will be interested in. Are there, and I think many of you have touched on this, but are there any upcoming projects or initiatives on your campus that you're able to share with us? Can you offer any final words of wisdom about our industry and advice you might help our audience to better serve your needs? And I think many of you have talked about your great consultants. Meera, you've said fabulous things about the folks you're working with, and others have as well. But I think this is a chance for everyone to go. And John, I'll go with you because we've been quiet for a moment.
Okay. Well, I'd say some of the upcoming things, of course, we will continue to modernize and update some of our dormitories. We have been thinking about some athletic venues and doing some updates there, improving some of the fields. We're working on tennis courts right now. And the dining hall, of course, we have a dining hall that is designed on the shelf waiting for funding. So that is that is coming up. I don't know which year. There will be a couple of enabling projects that happen before that happens. I've got to move archives out of the lower level of that building. So it was interesting when you were talking about master planning. We thought we knew where the archives was going until this pandemic. And then what changed our minds was the amount of people that were working remotely and how that impacted staff office space. And are we really forced, or do we really think that's the best location if we study our working habits, and if we, are there spaces that can be shared by people if they're not here every day, and could spaces be moved around and could go somewhere else? So that's just another smaller aspect of it's not really the academic side, classrooms and things, but that may have some impact going forward. So we have a few projects planned. We're trying to get through a number of these residence halls before we get on to dining. I don't know if you wanted to move on to words of wisdom. I don't know if I have any words of wisdom. I would say if you have the ability to avoid being in a pandemic, do that. Don't be in a pandemic. But if you are in a pandemic, I guess I would take this opportunity to thank and just maybe compliment, Meera was talking about her faculty and Alex about how they were teaching first in person, then remotely, then hybrid and asynchronously. So I can remember when we were going from in person to remotely, and I'm like, wow, how are they going to do that overnight? How are they going to learn to do that so quickly? And then when they were teaching both far and in the room, I was really blown away by the faculty. So I will just say that for Hotchkiss, and I'm sure that happened at all the other schools too. But also the staff, the flexibility of the staff and the students were incredible. They really rolled with the punches. There was a lot of thinking outside of the box. There was a lot of collaboration. No idea or suggestion was stupid. It was welcome and considered and discussed. And I think, the group came together and had much better decisions than an individual would have. So I just, it was extraordinary to go through this period in my career. I've never seen anything like it.
That's great. That's great. So, Brenda, do you want to?
So I would echo some of that, but I think, so future projects, I mentioned that we're internally in the process of working on a science center, and we start our campaign next year to hopefully open those doors in the fall of 2025. But I think words of wisdom, or maybe what the pandemic has allowed, is us to sit in our uncomfortableness a little bit. And I say that not only in terms of being a school, but also in terms of construction. Things have shifted a little bit where sometimes it's okay to be in a temporary space and to learn to live with it. And we have these conversations a lot. Well, this may not be the right place for you on campus. Before I build it out for you over the summer in a panic to get you in, could we live with this a little bit and see if we've got it right? There's more willingness to do that on everyone's part, to be a little bit unfinished. And just a little bit of learning, I think, coming in. So that's really helped us complete projects that are successful from the human standpoint moving forward. So that's what I would say the pandemic's taught us, and just keep learning to live with that.
Definitely, Alex.
So we've got going. So we're doing our houses project now. We're looking at a new admission visitor center on our campus. I think our big challenging project is you mentioned that we did an auditorium that's right next to one of our IMP buildings from 1972, and the exterior is a work of art. The interior, presents quite a few challenges. So I think that, that's one that we will be keeping up and not making sure the exterior is and treating as a work of art. But we've got to redo the interior for our theater, drama, visual arts programs. So we're gonna get rolling on these projects. So they all are, and that's exciting to have. I just when I got sort of asked the question, I think I probably put it into three big areas. I'll speak for Choate, and just as we're selecting people to work with in the in this field, I would say for us the sustainability is an absolute necessity. Like we're really not going to talk to anyone that isn't going to make that a fundamental part of the design. That we built to a LEED Gold minimum now at Choate, and we'd like to go further than that. I think it's just so. It's part of our strategic plan. We just have a giant commitment to making sure that we're pushing as fast and as quickly and as fast for all manner of projects, from the smallest to largest. So that, to me, that would be a sine qua non. The second thing, when we're selecting firms, part of our commitment to equity and inclusion, the school reaches into impacting beyond that. I agreed. When I saw this invite, it was particularly for this group, professional women in construction. That was important to me because this field has not been supportive or as gender balanced as it could be, and supporting anything to do that was important to me. So, Cho, we looking for firms. So if you want to do Cho, we want to see people of color and women in leadership positions in the firm, but particularly on our design team. If you come to a design team that doesn't have that, we really won't even bring someone in for an interview. And we know that doesn't happen overnight, so we're interested that if a firm is hiring with those things in mind, that is meaningful. So we'll ask that question in RFQs and RFPs to make sure. So for us, thinking about how the field can reflect our values and the people that we hire and work on our campus is of absolute critical importance. And I imagine that will happen in boarding schools and independent schools. So that may be words. And then the final piece I would say is technology is not an add-on for us. It's, again, like sustainability, built into the building, part of the design. I think even 10 years ago, it was like, oh, what are the bells and whistles we can add? It just has to be, like the bathrooms and the stairs and the doors, it just has to be fundamentally part of it. And understanding what works for teachers is important for a firm. I think we're looking for expertise for someone we're working with, an architectural firm, whoever it is, a designer, to say, we've seen this work at the university level or in business or in other schools, so that we can keep learning. So being well versed in that and bringing that to us is critical.
Thank you. And Meera, I'm going to give you the last moment and then turn it back over to Susan to close us out.
Thank you, Heather.
No. Okay. It's going to end automatically. So you don't have a lot of time.
I just want to conclude by thanking everyone and noting that it's precisely when your footing slips that you leap. And this is a time for calculated leaping, and recognizing that our goal is not a sybaritic hedonistic paradise. It's a utopia in which students can be nurtured and can be brought into their fullest selves. So that's the beauty. So it's not more is more, but it's really about thinking judiciously about what will help our students. And let's remember, our students now are not our students of 10 years ago. We are dealing with a scarred generation, and we'll continue to do that. And so it's about campuses that are healing as well as everything else. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we don't have very much time, so Susan, I'm just going to let you close this off. I don't think we really have time for questions. So Susan, back to you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Kathy, can you let me back on for a video?
Otherwise, we see her big VZ.
Yes, I know. I'm waiting for Kathy to let me. Okay, now I can start my video. There we go. So what a wonderful program. Thank you all. It was just wonderful to hear both perspectives, the heads of school as well as the facilities and planning at our private schools here in Southern New England. And we are very grateful for all of the time that you took to be with us this evening. So thanks again to our speakers for your time and your expertise. Special thanks to our PwC sponsors. Through your generosity, we're able to fulfill our mission to support a vibrant and viable and diverse future for our industry. We hope you'll join us for our next program on Tuesday, January 25th. We hope that this one will be able to be in person on the ground at the Sheraton in Rocky Hill. And the topic will be of interest to most of you, AEC Industry Women, Future Forward. So on behalf of the board, we wish all our panelists, our sponsors, and all of you the happiest of holidays and a healthy and prosperous new year. So good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.